welcome everyone. Glad everybody could make it during this challenging time. Today we're going to partner with our friends at Nealent from Prophecy, which is my employer, to teach you how to make an effective business case for master data management. And we'll talk first about why we're doing that, but we'll take care of some housekeeping first. As I said, for those that don't know me, my name is Bill O'Kane. For about a year now, I've been the VP and MDM strategist at Prophecy since last summer. Prior to that, I was the Gartner lead analyst for MDM and also provided coverage for data governance for about 8 years. And before that was a practitioner of MDM implementation, similar to what Nealent does today. I'll be joined by Chaitanya Khaladkar, also we call him CK. He's a lead solutions architect for Nealent, again, specializing in MDM as I do. So we like to state up front what we're going to learn today. It's a pretty interesting topic and one of our most popular by far. The most common mistake orgs make, and by that we mean the most common reason these things struggle and often even eventually fail, when building what they believe is a business case for master data management initiatives. We just did a very expensive market and deep market study of Prophecy. And the funny thing is that about 95% of the survey respondents said they had built a business case. But I know as an analyst that if you then ask them what it is, it'll fall into some categories that are really risky and don't involve business outcomes. So we're going to talk about that today. We'll have some examples that you may recognize. The benefits of what you'll hear today is you can avoid that mistake by just doing a few sort of non-intuitive techniques that will do a bunch of things. It'll help you maximize delivery of business benefits and speed them up. It'll safeguard your MDM program by being a buffer from things like reorgs and mergers and acquisitions and just competition for budget dollars. It will also avoid expending unnecessary effort and expense below the line to get where you want to go by getting diverted to non-important tasks or aspects of your program. And by doing all of that, it'll, in the aggregate, ensure that your program will be successful. And a nice side benefit is that it'll help you prove it to your management and to your stakeholders, and therefore build up some political capital to keep going and provide even more value as you move through this. So a quick thing in here, you'll hear Prophecy say things like MDM for the masses and MDM for the 90%. I just always like to take this time and talk about, so why is this such a problem? Business justification in general and effective business justification in particular for MDM. I came to Prophecy because they were pretty much the only vendor I covered while I was an analyst that attacked the lower 3 quadrants of this diagram. Everybody else was pretty content to make a fair amount of money in the upper right here, where you can with large organizations that have a lot of money to spend and can afford to make a lot of mistakes and have restarts and diversions and things like that. Everybody's pretty good at covering them because they, in effect, know how to cover themselves pretty well. Where Prophecy was kind of unique is it recognized the upper left and lower right quadrants as distinct entities. Rather than having 3 quadrants where people weren't ready to do this at all. On the upper left, we have aspiring, which is, IT's got a pretty good vision for all this stuff. They know how it should work. They may even have a reference architecture for a future state built, but they can't get anybody to pay for it or pay for it long enough to actually get it done. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that's the idea. Is IT's got a vision, but the business isn't really bought in. There's the tactical, that everybody may be bought in or not bought in, but the only way this is going to work is if we can all get together and get in there. Nealent as a partner, Prophecy as a vendor, and the stakeholder organization gets in there and does something fast that's pretty valuable. And everybody says, wow, the business even can see, boy, that was great. My reports are better, or I don't create duplicate customers anymore. I can introduce products faster, whatever it might be. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And the other one that kind of everybody in the market sort of bypasses as vendors is the opposite of aspiring. It's, the business knows they have a problem, but IT's not bought in. And we get a fair amount of that at Prophecy. I'm guessing Nealent does too, where the business just knows they have a problem. They may not even know it's data, or they're mistakenly blaming data when it's in fact the mechanisms that collect it and keep it that are the problem. In effect, the data architecture, but they don't really get paid to understand that. So when the only choice was to be in the upper right of this, the smart organizations, rather than make the mistake of trying to live in the navy blue bottom three quadrants, they just didn't do anything. And that's why there's still 90% of this market, the MDM market, that is either underserved or not served at all in terms of technology. And they make do with what they have, or they don't do anything at all. Another quote, this is one of the data points that we captured while I was an analyst. 80% of programs that are justified are generally justified with some things we're going to talk about that aren't real business justifications. They sound very good, and they happen all the time, but they very often lead to very high risk, a lot of headaches, and even failures in some cases. Again, these are things that are going to sound logical, and they are. They're correct. They're not incorrect, but they have a fatal flaw. And there's usually two versions of this. I like to say, if you make your MDM pitch internally and you don't get any funding, the business just says, I don't understand this, or it sounds complicated and expensive, which it can be. We're just not going to fund you. That's bad. And again, the business may say, no, we're going to go out and get a CRM application. The vendor that sells it says, and I'm not picking on anyone in particular, says that your revenue will go up 15% if you buy it, and they might even be right. What they're not telling you, and I've covered this in other venues, is that that's going to create some technical debt that you might eventually have to pay off. But that's the idea: is you don't get any money; it goes someplace else. What's even worse is you get some money. And you do some things, and then you go to get more, and you think everything's going okay because you did everything you said you would do, and now all of a sudden you're having the discussion that we're going to talk about today, where the business says, what did you do with all that money and the 9 months you just had? And I used to get people calling me saying, I heard myself responding with data architecture principles about canonical forms and 360 views and things like that, and I knew I was in trouble. How do you talk about this? So again, the idea is actually a pretty simple one here. It's just elusive. You really just want to have that discussion first. What do you expect out of this? What is it that we want to accomplish from a business standpoint? What will we get if we do this? And again, the great thing about that is if you start to talk about just clean data and better reports and things like that, the most business stakeholders will have the same reaction initially as well. This is a lot of money. Can you be more specific? And then you find out if your organization's really equipped from a culture standpoint to have these conversations about how to change business processes, which is really what digital transformation is all about, and how to get there and how to deliver value quickly without waiting a year or two to get to where you want to go as an end state. But it's really about moving that discussion up front. I used to be fond of saying, you don't have to talk about these things now, but you will eventually. It'll just be like the statements on the bottom, or up top there. What did we get? What'd you do with all my money? When are you going to be done? And if your answer to what did you do with all that money is, well, I cleaned up a lot of data, that's pretty risky. And again, that sounds good and it's not incorrect, but when conflict arises and there's contention for funding, it tends to be less than effective. And again, you want to provide a buffer against disruption. I brought this up earlier. Things like mergers and acquisitions and reorgs. If you have a real and ratified, we'll get back to that later, ratified business case, it gets easier to sort of objectively say, well, yeah, this is what we were doing. Here's what it's worth. Are you saying you don't want to do this now? And that's the kind of conversation you want to have. And sometimes you don't get the answer you want, but at least it's an informed decision. It's not a subjective thing where someone says, I just don't get this, and so I'm going to put it on hold. So again, another way of saying this in sort of a negative way is number one reason for MDM failure is lack of business, some version of lack of a business literate business case that a business person can say, when I come in on Monday morning after they do this, the first version of this, I'm going to do my job this way instead, and I know that's better, and I know how much better it is. So the only way to really get to that is to use a structured framework that everybody ratifies. So again, if I build this and then I put it in a drawer, I might get to use it later during my performance review, but it's really not what we're intending here. We're intending for everyone who needs to agree that if I deliver X as a process enhancement or an analytics enhancement or both, that I've been successful and that we can achieve the benefits we said we would. There's another interesting figure that we pulled together over the years is about a little less than 2/3 of these projects don't even go beyond piloting and experimentation because uh, often that's when the business first sort of engages and says, why are we doing this? You know, this looks complicated, and am I going to have to be trained? And the answer is probably yes, if you're going to have data stewards, which you should, uh, and all of that. You know, it can be daunting. So again, what you want is to lead with is the benefit, the things that they're going to get out of it that they can actually feel and touch. So I said earlier we would talk about the usual suspects of dysfunctional business cases. These are things that are correct and they make sense. Uh, and I can tell you, I had over my 8 years as an analyst, I had 3,000 client interactions, or a little more than that. And a lot of them, about 80% of them at one point would touch on this idea of business case. So I would always say, you know, especially if someone was struggling, okay, what was your original sort of business justification for doing this? And when they were struggling, I always got one of four answers. And they're, again, they sound good. Oh, why are you doing this? And this is an increasing order of frequency currently. Our data quality is not good. Well, that's probably not a good thing, but that's a very broad statement, and we really want to talk about what damage that's doing. So again, you know, why do you want your data quality to be better? You've been operating some number of years with poor to middling data quality according to why you're here, and you know everything was sort of okay. And by sort of okay, I mean there were other things that took priority. But the bottom line is you were able to do business in the current situation. Why do you want to do this? And that's just, again, to pull out or extract sort of the real reasons we're here, because we want to scope better, we want to justify properly, and we want to right-size the solution. Again, we don't, for example, want to solve a $500,000 problem with $2 million, which people do all the time. You'll solve it, but again, probably not the best way to go. The next one is better decisions. I need better reports and analytics. Okay, well, which ones are we talking about? Because you probably have many. And if we decide to clean all of them up, a lot of which probably aren't used, it's going to be expensive and take a long time. You know, what does that mean, better decisions? What are the decisions you're making now that you think are suboptimal? And they probably are, but let's talk about them. Now we get to the more frequent one, single version of the truth. Well, I won't even debate whether that's possible or necessary. There are people out there that will say there's no such thing as that. There are views of the truth. I would just say as a concept, this kind of loses its steam. Again, this is a way to get something. And I'll hammer on that a little bit more with number 4, because it's by far the most common these days. But again, this is a means to an end, and I'll repeat that later. This is the what you're going to do, not why. So again, I would say if I gave you that tonight, if I gave you that single version of the truth for a customer or a product or a supplier or a location or a material, what would you do with it tomorrow? Well, what would you do in your job that would be different? And that's what we're after in this session, is that type of thing. And number 4, there are 360-degree views of products and other things, but the 360 view of the customer is the current leader of the hit parade. You know, why do you want to do this information management or master data management program? Well, we need a 360 view of the customer. And if you then say, well, if I gave that to you, what would you do with it right now? The majority of organizations don't really know, or they'll say something general like, well, improve sales and service. Great. But you know, the next thing I'm going to ask you is, what attributes, master and non-master, do you think need to be in that 360-degree view? And the vast majority of people who I posed that question to didn't have the answer at hand. And that's on the other side of a lot of analysis, a lot of requirements gathering. But again, that's a means to an end. That's the most business sounding of all of them. But again, that's just an architectural strategy to get to a business outcome. We want those business outcomes defined so that we can scope our efforts better. And again, when many of these things fail, 80% of the ones I saw, something like this was the business case, 360 view of the customer. Again, I would just submit that's sort of how you're going to get something, not why. And it's easy to fall into this trap. So there was a new one in the last couple of years that also sounds pretty good. Not as frequent as it I think will be. We want to monetize our data. Now, if you're, and we at Prophecy, we have several customers like this that are sort of data bureaus or data providers. So they in turn have customers that they submit data and reports for, or supply data sets to. So if you're not that and you're saying monetize our data, we would always ask, okay, what is, much like anything else, what does that mean exactly? Which data, what do you think you can do with it? What's the business plan for monetizing that data? Because in effect, you're starting up a new business, whether it's internal or external to you, you're starting up a new business, and you should do a lot of the same sort of things you would do if you were starting an external business, or a completely new infrastructure-based business, let's say. So again, great. What's your vision for that? Not your strategy, but your vision. And again, without specific use cases underneath that concept, you're going to have the same risks of failure, and sometimes it's even worse because people may not know what they're talking about or what you mean when you say monetize our data. So you might have to define that term and then talk about specific use cases. But again, avoid this idea of just putting these broad concepts out there and then chasing them. And again, this is the 4 out of 5 times, this level of ambiguity is how these things start out. The key is not to let it persist. So again, I said before, means to an end is not an end. 360 view of a customer is a means to an end. You're going to use that to do something or get something. What are those things? And there may be multiple. My rule of thumb was always, 2 or 3 per budget cycle, 2 or 3 real business targets per budget cycle is usually plenty. I've seen 1 be enough. If you start to get to 5, 6, or 7, clearly you're not going to deliver all those in 3 to 6 months, and that's kind of our target here. Prophecy is known in the market for delivering very commonly solutions in less than 3 months, and that's using partners to great effect, such as Nealon. So how can I get around this? If I could see you guys, I would have seen heads nodding when I said 360 view of customer. I used to do these things live, and I would say that everybody would just sort of look up and look guilty. But there are some pretty interesting techniques I found over the years to help people kind of try to restate or make that shift from sort of how I'm going to do it and what my techniques are going to be to what I'm going to provide as an outcome or outcomes. So the first one is kind of simple, but it can be very, very difficult, even for business executives. Try to state your business outcomes or business case then without saying data. So, an example of that is I want to increase customer onboarding rate by 30%, reducing my error rate to 5% from whatever it is now. And, you might sort of monetize that, and I'll get to that more specifically in a second. But this is what we're talking about. You don't really see the word data there. MDM is often even better, put behind the scenes as a technical solution, and just let people know what's going to happen when you do it. I like to tell people, this is from my history, one of the most effective, if not the most effective MDM program I executed was called 21st Century Account Opening. And it was quite a while ago, but the business, if I had tried to explain that MDM was part of this, I would have just gotten fired, or at least gotten some strange looks. All they wanted to know was that when they came in on Monday morning, the account opening process was now going to look like this, and they were going to be prevented from creating duplicate customers by this, whatever this pop-up window is that came up. They didn't know what provided the pop-up window. It happened to be an MDM solution. Reduce slack in new product introduction cycle by X%. I would say in general, I used to get this question a lot, that these are the kind of 2 most popular clustering areas for these things: acquiring or servicing customers and introducing or servicing products. I only bring that up because I used to get that question quite a bit. What's the most common area where these things are defined, and that's it. Another one that's come up more frequently recently is increase asset uptime by keeping the asset master data in a central hub and keeping it maintained, and that way all the event-driven data around usage of the asset can be sort of partitioned away and have different standards for governance enforced on it than the master data. Now, this is an ominous statement. If you can't do this, I advised often and ardently, just take a pause here, because this is an indicator that you're going to do more than you need to do, and you're still not going to do enough. And that's a paradoxical statement, where what I mean is you'll end up, and I'm going to deliberately use numbers from research I've done, both before and since joining Prophecy, that when these techniques are not used and you just attack it as sort of a 360 view problem or something similar, it's quite common to have a data scope, but and by that I mean attributes, a data scope 60% bigger than it needs to be. Another way of saying that is I commonly approached architects that were considered quite successful, and I would say, okay, how much of that data are you actually using? And most of them would say, oh, 40 or 45, maybe 50%. I could have probably cut this in half and been done sooner. I still would have had to use the same tool, so it's not a question of that. And it wasn't my partner's fault or my vendor's fault. It was us. We never really put together a business-driven thing, and we kind of made our partners do things our way. And we're considered successful. We're live. We're in. We provided benefit. But we spent more than we needed to, both in time, and money, and behind that resources. So again, this is a pretty good checkpoint. If you can't say why you want to do these things without saying data in your response, unless you're monetizing data, but any other time, if you can't do this, you really want to take a step back, because it means you might be in that category of using the how in place of the why. Another way of looking at this that our clients really find quite effective is to kind of divide up business benefits this way. When people say, I'm really struggling with this idea of how to do this, and I'll suggest this kind of little technique to do it. So, and then we'll talk along the way here about why people just don't do this out of the gate. Most IT people, and I'm the worst offender, so it's okay if I say this. Most IT people, if you ask them to solve problems, what they'll do is they'll concentrate on benefits that they can do by themselves, that save the company money, that involve fixing current things that aren't optimal, right? So it's even to the extent of a business process. Most IT people are sort of closet BPM people, and can look at a business process and see how it might be better. But the idea is they're going to stay in this lower left, which says, I'm going to fix something that's sort of broken or not optimal, and by that I'm going to save the company money by making things better, faster, and cheaper, and everything's going to be great. Well, that's all correct. There's nothing wrong with that. I will tell you that by itself is almost never enough to make a real business case for MDM and even broader data management. So what we advise is, and I'll describe these other quadrants here. Below the horizontal axis is saving money, and above it is making money. So above the line and below the line in the true accounting sense or finance sense. The vertical axis is a little more interesting, and that's what's new to most people, is that to the left of the vertical axis are things you already do that you're probably not optimal at. So it might be just the most mundane business processes or analytics, but you're just not as good at, and everybody knows what could be done to fix them, but we just don't do it because other things are more important. To the right is really interesting. Those are things you can't do at all, or net new processes. So what we try to get people to do, and I've been doing this for over a decade, is to move to the upper right, find things that we can't do at all that would actually make us more revenue or new revenue. Why don't people do that out of the gate? And as a lifer in IT and an architect, I think it's because, again, we don't have to meet or get to know as many people. You can't really do that upper right without some kind of business collaboration and prioritization and some kind of entrepreneurial spirit. It's harder, it's more challenging, but that's where the real benefits of this are. So if you want to talk about things like digital business or digital transformation, that's where this is. This is where that is. It's in this upper right where you get the business involved. This is so critical that I would say the hardest discussions I've had over the last 10 years have been where an IT person says, I know what you mean, but my business partners or stakeholders never are going to think like this. We're just not that kind of company. This is so important that I've advised people in that position to, go out and get some business consultants that have worked with your competitors, because other people in your market are doing this, and you're just going to get left in the dust. You won't have transformed yourselves. But so this is the idea. You want to pull up this whole effort and justification process from the lower left, where IT is just sitting in a dark room. And again, they're doing things that need to be done, and they should be tracked, and they should get credit for it. But again, just inductively out there in the field, if you stay there, that's when a year later, the people that you should have collaborated with will start asking what's going on. and you won't be able to talk to them in their language or say things that mean anything to them, or that will convince them that what you want to do is just as important as whoever's talking to them and trying to get your money, your budget money. So, and again, we want this all to be objective. They shouldn't have to operate subjectively. They should be presented with a ratified set of data that is so objective that they would have to refute it to change direction, and that's a good thing, because they shouldn't be able to just do it because they don't understand data management or MDM. So another technique that I have brought with me over the years, if anybody deals with HR, you've probably heard of SMART goals. We use them at Prophecy. They're also good to apply to data management programs, including MDM, especially the first two, and the last one to some extent. But I used to use this to help people, especially senior management, get to realize that they didn't have a business case. Is this something you could do over and over again? And could you measure it? That's probably the most important question. Could I prove that I did this? And again, an onboarding rate or a new product introduction cycle speed or cycle time is a good objective. Did it get faster or not? So again, another good sort of litmus test is, can I measure it, and could I repeat it? Are these things that I can assign to a specific person? Can I assign better data quality or better decisions to a specific person? Probably not. So again, just another technique to use. And if you look up SMART goals on the internet, I think there's even a Wikipedia entry on how these came to be. But generally, they're HR things. I just find them interesting to apply to data programs. I talked about money as part of the business case a little while ago. That's the best case. If you can actually quantify in terms of dollars saved or dollars expected to be made, or both, that's the best. But in reality, most organizations are much more comfortable with simple workflow metrics like onboarding rates or introduction rates or service rates, throughput rates of transactions, that kind of thing. Level of compliance, reduction, of penalties for things like that. Those are easy from a financial standpoint because there are real potential fines. So again, I had a big background in banking, and we all know nothing beats a compliance business case, because if you don't do it, we know what the penalty is going to be. So again, financials best, but if you can't do it, workflow metrics are fine. The key is consistency, because what you're guarding against as part of this business case is to actually get to keep going in the face of conflict or contention for funding. So again, as long as everybody's working to the same yardstick, it's okay. It doesn't have to be dollars. What you want to avoid is not. So there's operational versus analytical MDM. Again, this is another concept to think about. Analytical MDM is important because often you start there. You start by making your analytical data in your data warehouse cleaner by using an MDM hub, let's say, but then you quickly move on to enabling it with a service bus, let's say, and having your business apps operate on it in real time, like for things like duplicate prevention and maybe fraud detection or credit risk reduction, things like that. But you want to start off with sort of a non-invasive downstream approach, and then maybe work your way up as you can justify it. Again, always with a business outcome that's very clear and agreed to before you move more upstream into the systems of record. So what do you do next? And we'll hand it to Neil and to kind of go through the specifics of this. Identify a framework to capture, categorize, and ratify, and I put that in italics purposely, business benefits for strategic data management program. If you have an internal ROI methodology and you're happy with it, we use our framework that CK is going to show you in a minute. We use that in places that already have methodologies because they're big and heavy and complicated. They will eventually have to be used, but they need input, and this is a very good framework to even do that. So it's not uncommon for the output to be used as part of a more formalized methodology, but people that are doing these things don't want to start with that methodology. And again, Neil is very versed in doing this as well, as you'll see, and carrying that business case forward. If it's attached to a larger strategic initiative, and as CK will point out, our framework does have a way to do that as part of it. It's embedded in it. But you want to know, is this part of a big ERP re-engineering project that's going to fail if we don't do it? Then it shouldn't be looked at on its own as a standalone MDM program, because then it can be canceled or postponed. And then the ERP or CRM implementation begins to incur technical debt. You just want to understand that or prevent it. Things like one customer, one enterprise, are also good candidates. Get agreement. This is what we said. Part of this framework is to go back and say, okay, here's what we heard. It's all compiled here. Is this correct? And if it is, can we get your blessing? That's critically important. Again, especially as a buffer between internal and external events. And treat it as a living document. Don't just cast it in stone. What I really hate hearing is, yeah, we did that 18 months ago. I don't even know if it's still correct. We acquired 2 companies since then. So it's probably not correct anymore, but we're just kind of going on forward inertia. That's, when there's trouble, when things like, let's say, you acquired 2 companies. What if you get acquired? You're going to get stopped in your tracks from completing this potentially, and you'd have a lot of sunk costs at that point. So again, just some things you want to take on board to avoid negative events and optimize the positive ones. And with that, I'll turn things over to CK to take us through the impact roadmap and the NEOLINT approach.
Thanks, Bill. So let's talk through the business impact roadmap a little bit. And one of the goals here, in general, for the entire roadmap is to make sure that there is a consistency, just like Bill mentioned, for defining the metrics, defining what you want to achieve, defining your goals, and of course, you want to look at what is a net new process that can bring business value. And to that end, it's a 4-step process, of course, that looks at understanding your landscape, looking at what are your strategies, objectives, where do you want to be, like I mentioned, metrics earlier, what are your current processes. From there, looking at what are the processes or what should you be focusing on, what are the drivers for value, improving customer experience, best practices, and looking at a maturity curve for where you're at currently, where you would like to be. So it's also a case of setting up goals that are achievable, and looking at how do we get there. So think of it more of a roadmap to get from current state to whatever next goal has been created. Of course, you want to assess the value of what's been defined as a solution. You want to make sure that everybody is in agreement, gain a consensus from everybody involved, all the stakeholders, and then of course you want to deliver on that roadmap. And that delivery itself is what will get you the return on investment. And the whole process of this business impact roadmap. And we'll talk a little about quick starts for how NEOLINT is partnering with Prophecy to get this started or get these roadmaps implemented. Step 1 is the roadmap itself. So we do want to make sure that it's something that is created, it's something that's defined. Like Bill also mentioned, it's a living and breathing document. So it is something that will and is expected to change over a period of time as the goals change or as new processes are identified. But this is where we want to start laying a foundation to make sure that you have success in the future. The value map, this is similar to a Deloitte value map, and we're using only one level to represent the diagram here. Of course, you can keep going down, but really from a standpoint of looking at what that impact roadmap looks like or what the goals should be, we want to make sure that we're driving stakeholder value and also looking at creating a value map within the organization. So depending on what your business is, that's something we want to look for. And then a couple other important things, right? So this drives back to getting consensus from all the stakeholders. And this could be definitions that we have in terms of, let's say it's an ERP system. What are the metrics we want to identify? What is where is it coming from? Whether it's for supply chain, whether it's for customer interaction. Is everybody in the entire stakeholder group committed to making sure that if there are any changes or if there's a process change, you're implementing a new process, is that something that everybody is on board to make sure that it gets implemented? So as an organization, you want to make sure that you're driving that value in terms of what the process is, a net new process. And there might be cases where sometimes you don't necessarily go from, like that earlier picture we had for, you don't necessarily go from one quadrant to other and just jump across. It'd be nice, but maybe there's a step in between. Maybe sometimes there is another implementation step that needs to happen, or data quality that needs to be improved. To support any of the business goals. So of course, you're still setting up your goals, not saying data, but there is data that will support those goals. And so to that end, you want to make sure that there's a consensus from the entire stakeholder group. Also, there might be cases where there are teams operating downstream of the changes who are involved in that decision-making process. And so the next question that usually gets asked is, what kind of involvement is expected? And typically what we see, right, is the involvement from business leadership. We see a need for about a half-hour meeting with business stakeholders to prioritize and to focus on goals from a business perspective, from a strategic standpoint. And then from the business and the IT teams, who will be the implementers, to have about an hour meeting with subject matter experts, sometimes longer, depends on what topics and depends on how deep we are going with the questions there. And to make sure that we have collected a sense of what's available currently, are there any impediments to implementing the new process, and how best could we implement a business process to achieve the plans and objectives. So there is a lot of collaboration involved in this process that we see that is necessary from both the leadership from a strategic standpoint, also from the teams who are executing from an operational standpoint, to make sure the entire effort is a success. And then, one of the examples is, or some of these screenshots we included for what does that roadmap look like. So just as an example, we want to make sure that this is ready to be presented at a board level meeting, which provides guidance in terms of what the next steps look like, what does the future look like, where do you want to go from your current state on a maturity curve to a future state, what will it cost, what's the return on investment, things like that. And that is something that we want to deliver as a part of the business impact roadmap. And from there, we can then start executing on the roadmap. So a little background about Neeland for what we do before we get into how we implement that roadmap. So Neeland is a global company. Within the US, we're headquartered in Minnesota with offices in Texas, California, Connecticut, and Philadelphia. And of course, offices across the globe as well. So if you're a global organization who needs help in local offices or who needs touch points in local offices, we're able to provide that as well. And then just a quick view of all the kinds of work that Neeland does. And MDM as a topic for business spans across multiple different disciplines. A lot of times, master data management gets pigeoned into just the analytical portion. But then there's also a whole big component of a transformation within an organization, just like going into new processes that will bring new value. And so we are able to help customers across that entire journey with different objectives that they might have. And the last thing is to get started. As the first step, of course, you would want to do the roadmap. And after the roadmap is created, it's a question of how are you going to go about implementing that roadmap. So to that end, we came up with a few quick starts in terms of what our customers could choose. And in a short time frame, we are able to provide an output rather than a 6-month or a many-month project. This is not necessarily meant to be a replacement to a change initiative. This is supposed to be an accelerator to get the process going. And so one of the options we've created is purely focused on just master data management, and that revolves around utilizing a business case for proof of concept, of course, using the Prophecy platform and software, and to look at adding to the business impact roadmap and then creating a data governance roadmap for how do we implement the goals that were identified in the earlier planning sessions. How is it that we support those initiatives with either data that's available or with data that needs to be collected or with data quality that needs to be improved? And so the goal there is focused around all the necessary data and information for that master data management initiative across the organization. We also can look at it through a different lens where an organization might have some other goals that they are already in pursuit of. This could involve quality metrics. This could involve financial reporting. This could involve forecasting. And a lot of that analytics kind of work is something that, of course, Neelan does. But as a part of that process, there is always a need to look at what is the component of master data, how does that affect your process, or is that something that will actually help you create a new process or drive the need towards a new process? And one of the examples could be if you have a sales process that goes through multiple different steps, is there something that you need to do to create different workloads in the sales process so that you don't have to go through multiple steps to get an approval, or so that you can shorten the cycle of the process, just as an example. So those are things you could do, or things like validating materials and parts. If you're a manufacturing company, things like validating some of that, some of the parts when they are delivered, when they come in, looking for non-compliance, analyzing that data, and then making changes to your business process to drive more value. So we can look at the initiatives that you might have through that lens as well. And then finally, if you are a retail or a manufacturing company or an organization, we have pre-built solutions that for manufacturers look at analyzing the quality and the warranty claims attached, or the warranty claims that are addressed because of quality or because of any manufacturing challenges. And that allows us to look at any financial exposure, any warranty reserves, optimizing the warranty reserves, looking at any possible legal exposure, looking at providing metrics for improving quality, improving product, and improving product lifecycle in general. And for retail, we have a solution that will allow you to look at look across all channels for marketing. So we call it our omni-channel solution. And basically, it allows you to look at your marketing spend, to optimize your marketing spend, looking through all different channels for marketing that you might have for retail or customer outreach, and utilizing that to the best advantage in terms of how do you get the most return on investment for that marketing. And so if you're in those two industries, for retail or manufacturing, those are pre-built solutions that we have. Of course, they also leverage Prophecy software for master data management. And we have these pre-built options or pre-built quick starts for something that you could get started with very quickly. And of course, we also have always the option for looking at, as an organization, depending on your business impact roadmap, there might be a completely different need that may not fit in these quick starts, and we are happy to support you with those services as well. With that, we will switch into any questions that you might have. That's the end of our presentation. If there are any questions, we'll take those. And of course, you can always reach out to us via email as well if you have any questions in the future.
Thanks, CK. So we only have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to take the first question that was asked is very pertinent, especially considering the last slide there.
Mm-hmm.
And actually the whole presentation where they said, MDM is known to take a long time, and you're talking about a business case and delivering value early. How is that generally done? I would just start the discussion by saying, the key is to keep those first deliverables to more of a downstream orientation, like analytics-based or dashboard-based, presentation-based, things like that. MDM, like I said, the real transformational stuff happens sort of in a little further down the road in terms of real-time integration with business apps that you may already have on site and have been using for a long time. That's critical to get the full value, but trying to do that right out of the gate is what I think got MDM its reputation for taking a long time to do. So again, if we stick to the things that are on those things like those three options on that prior slide, I think that's where you get that sort of quick delivery from.
That's wonderful, and I think that's extremely valid, right? Is we've usually seen that as a very common question for how do we get started, or what are the gotchas in the process?
Right, and and just to be clear, once you do that downstream construction, that entire software and hardware infrastructure is reused for that sort of digital transformation. In a sense, you're kind of lifting it up and moving it upstream, but it's the same infrastructure. You're just implementing in a sort of more non-invasive way, so that you don't have to tear up all your operational systems to get it to talk to get them to talk to this. You can just do your analytics first, but the key is not to stop there.